The Lonely Rider. The sun beat down with relentless fury, a golden hammer striking the vast anvil of the desert. Tall Bear, astride his paint mare, Traveler, felt the heat radiating from the parched earth, shimmering in the distance like an unreachable lake. Days had blurred into a monotonous rhythm of riding, observing, and conserving, each sunrise finding him further from the green hills of his homeland, deeper into this stark, beautiful wilderness. His quest for new hunting grounds, a solution to the dwindling game near his village, had led him to this desolate expanse. He scanned the horizon, his keen eyes missing nothing. A faint disturbance in the dust to his left caught his attention, the distinct print of a desert fox, followed by the scuff of a rattlesnake. Life, tenacious and fierce, persisted even here. A lone buzzard circled high above, a patient sentinel against the boundless blue. The silence of the desert was profound, broken only by the rhythmic thud of travelers' hooves and the whisper of the wind. It was a solitude that might break a lesser man, but Tall Bear found a certain peace in its immensity, a clarity that sharpened his senses. Yet, beneath the calm, a primal vigilance remained. This was a land that demanded respect, a place where survival was a constant, unspoken challenge. He reached for his water skin, taking a measured sip, his gaze sweeping the undulating landscape, searching for any sign, any hint, of what lay ahead. A wounded stranger. The sun, a blazing orb, beat down on the endless expanse of sand and rock. Tall Bear, his eyes keen and unblinking, scanned the shimmering horizon. A flicker of movement, barely perceptible, caught his attention, a dark, irregular shape against the ochre dunes. He reined in his paint pony, a silent question in his gaze. It was too still to be an animal, too isolated to be a lone rider. Approaching with a hunter's quiet grace, Tall Bear dismounted, his moccasins whispering against the parched earth. As he drew closer, the figure resolved into a man, collapsed beside a meager, thorny bush. A gasp of recognition escaped Tall Bear's lips. It was Snake Eyes, the notorious outlaw whose raids had terrorized homesteads for months. His face was a mask of dust and dried blood, a ragged, crimson stain blooming across his chest. A broken arrow shaft protruded from his side, a crude testament to a recent, brutal encounter. Tall Bear's hand instinctively went to the knife at his belt. This man was an enemy, a predator who had brought ruin to many. To leave him here was to ensure his slow, agonizing end, a just deserts for his crimes. Yet, Tall Bear's spirit recoiled from the thought. The code of his people, the deep respect for all life, warred with the pragmatic logic of a warrior. A wounded animal, even a venomous one, deserved a measure of mercy. He saw not the bandit, but a dying man, his breath shallow and ragged. The desert offered no quarter, but Tall Bear knew he could. An unexpected kindness. The sun beat down with relentless fury, turning the very air into a shimmering haze. Tall Bear dismounted, his movements unhurried, his gaze fixed on the prone figure of Snake Eyes. The bandit lay twisted, a dark stain spreading across his buckskin shirt. A low groan escaped him as Tall Bear approached, and the glint of suspicion, then defiance, flashed in his eyes. Water, Tall Bear stated simply, extending his water skin. Snake Eyes hesitated, his parched lips cracked, his mind warring with ingrained distrust. But the agony of thirst was a powerful persuader. He snatched the skin, gulping greedily, the cool liquid a shock to his system. Tall Bear knelt, his hands moving with quiet purpose. He plucked broad desert leaves, crushing them between his fingers, their pungent scent mingling with the acrid smell of dust and blood. "These will help," he murmured, gently pressing the poultice onto the gash on Snake Eyes' arm, then the shallow knife wound on his side. A hiss of pain escaped the bandit, but he didn't pull away. The touch was surprisingly gentle, devoid of malice. Hours crawled by. Tall Bear sat nearby, a silent sentinel, occasionally offering another drink, or adjusting the herbal dressings. Snake Eyes watched him, his initial cynicism slowly eroding, replaced by a growing bewilderment. He'd expected an arrow, a final blow, not this inexplicable act of mercy. The throbbing in his wounds lessened, the haze of pain beginning to recede. He could feel strength, fragile but persistent, returning to his limbs. He owed this man his life, a debt he never thought he'd incur. A lingering look. The sun, a fiery orb, beat down on Snake Eyes as he pushed himself up. Every muscle screamed in protest, a dull ache radiating from his bandaged side. He swayed, his vision momentarily blurring, but his gaze fixed on his horse. The mare, thankfully still tethered, whickered softly as he approached, her breath a warm puff against his hand. Mounting was an agony, each hoist of his leg a monumental effort, but he gritted his teeth, pulling himself into the saddle. He slumped forward, his hands gripping the reins, his knuckles white. Before urging the mare onward, he turned, his eyes finding Tall Bear. The warrior stood silhouetted against the vast, empty expanse of the desert, his posture calm and unwavering. A strange, unfamiliar twist tightened in Snake Eyes' gut. It wasn't gratitude, not exactly, but something akin to it, a grudging respect, perhaps, for the man who had inexplicably chosen to help him. His usual cynical sneer was absent, replaced by a complex mix of surprise and a nascent, unwelcome sense of obligation. He held the gaze for a long moment, the silence thick between them, before a curt nod, almost imperceptible, dipped his chin. With a gentle nudge of his heels, Snake Eyes spurred the mare forward. The horse began a slow, steady walk, kicking up dust in its wake. He didn't look back again, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon, a small, solitary figure shrinking into the boundless desert. Tall Bear remained, watching until the rider was nothing more than a speck, swallowed by the shimmering heat haze. The path of goodness. The sun, a fiery orb, climbed higher, casting long, dancing shadows across the rugged terrain as Tall Bear continued his journey. The rhythmic creak of his saddle and the steady thud of his horse's hooves against the dry earth were the only sounds disturbing the vast silence. He rode with a familiar ease, his gaze sweeping the horizon, but his thoughts lingered on the encounter in the canyon. The image of the bandit, wounded and desperate, flickered in his mind's eye. A quiet satisfaction, like the warmth of a dying ember, settled in his chest. He had chosen mercy, an act that, to some, might seem foolish or dangerous. Yet, to Tall Bear, it was simply the right path. His people had always taught that true strength lay not in vengeance, but in compassion. Even when facing those who had shown no mercy themselves, extending a hand, however begrudgingly accepted, upheld a deeper honor. He believed a man's worth was measured not by the enemies he vanquished, but by the kindness he offered, even to those who seemed least deserving. The wind whispered through the sparse mesquite, a soft echo of his conviction. He knew the world was harsh, but that only strengthened his resolve to walk a path of goodness, come what may. The canyon ambush. The sun, a fiery eye in the vast blue, beat down mercilessly as Tall Bear guided his horse into the canyon's maw. The air grew still and heavy, trapping the heat within the towering rock walls that rose like ancient sentinels on either side. The path narrowed, forcing him to dismount and lead his horse through the twisting passage, the only sound the rhythmic crunch of hooves on loose scree. A strange quiet had settled, the usual desert hum absent, and a prickle of unease traced its way up Tall Bear's spine. His fingers instinctively brushed the hilt of his hunting knife. Suddenly, the silence shattered. Two shots ripped through the air, echoing violently off the canyon walls. Tall Bear's horse shied, whinnying in alarm, as figures emerged from behind jagged boulders ahead and to his right. Four men, rifles leveled, moved with a grim purpose. "Hold right there, Cherokee," a voice boomed, thick with anger. It was Dusty, younger than the others, his face flushed and jaw tight. "Where's our brother? What did you do to Snake Eyes?" Tall Bear stood his ground, his gaze sweeping over the men, noting the glint of suspicion and rage in their eyes. "I did nothing to your brother," he stated calmly, his voice a low rumble against the canyon's echoes. "He was wounded, and I helped him." "Lies." Dusty spat, stepping forward, his rifle now aimed squarely at Tall Bear's chest. He wouldn't just vanish. You left him to die, didn't you? Or worse. The other brothers, older and more weathered, flanked Dusty, their expressions mirroring his animosity. The canyon, once a path, had become a trap. Warriors stand. The first bullet whizzed past Tall Bear's ear, a sharp whistle of displaced air. He instinctively dropped, rolling behind a sun-baked boulder just as a second shot chipped stone where his head had been. You ain't getting away, Redskin, a voice bellowed, thick with malice. Tall Bear peered over the rock, spotting 3 figures silhouetted against the morning sun. The brothers. Dusty, the youngest, notched an arrow with surprising speed. Tall Bear didn't hesitate. He burst from cover, a blur of motion, dodging the arrow that thudded into the ground he'd just vacated. The terrain, a treacherous mix of loose shale and prickly pear, became his ally. He moved with the grace of a desert fox, using every dip and rise, every gnarled mesquite bush, as temporary concealment. He heard Dusty yell, "He's too fast. Get him, boys." He knew the odds were stacked against him. 3 against 1, armed with both firearms and bows. It was an unfair fight, a betrayal of the mercy he'd shown, but surrender was not in his spirit. His gaze hardened. He saw a narrow crevice, a natural choke point, and a plan began to form. He wasn't giving up. Not now, not ever. The desert wind carried the scent of dust and a faint metallic tang of gunsmoke. A friend in need. The sun beat down, a relentless hammer on Tall Bear's exposed back. He swayed, each breath a painful rasp, his muscles screaming in protest. 2 arrows quivered in the dirt beside him, narrowly missed, a testament to Dusty's improving aim. He knew his strength was fading, the world starting to blur at the edges. One more volley, he thought, and it would be over. He braced himself, a grim acceptance settling over him. Suddenly, a distant speck on the horizon grew, rapidly morphing into a rider. The horse thundered closer, kicking up a plume of dust that billowed like a desert spirit. Tall Bear squinted, recognizing the lean, familiar silhouette. Snake Eyes. Dusty. Rider. Hold your fire, you fools. The voice, rough as a coyote's bark, cut through the oppressive silence, laced with an unfamiliar urgency. Snake Eyes reined in his horse, skidding to a halt between Tall Bear and his brothers. His eyes, usually narrowed in suspicion, were wide with a fierce command. "What in the blazes are you doing? Drop your weapons, now. Kindness's shield." Snake Eyes' voice, usually a gravelly rasp, cracked with raw emotion. "He could have left me. Left me for the buzzards, just like any of you would have done." He pointed a trembling finger at Dusty, then at the silent figures flanking him. "My leg was shattered. Sun was beating down like a blacksmith's hammer. He found me, patched me up, gave me water when I was seeing double." He paused, his gaze fixing on Tall Bear, a strange mixture of gratitude and lingering suspicion in his eyes. "He even carried me for a while, knowing I was one of the Snake Eyes gang. He risked his own neck for a stranger, for me." Dusty's rifle, which had been aimed squarely at Tall Bear's chest, slowly dipped. The other 2 outlaws exchanged uneasy glances, their initial fury replaced by a creeping shame. The desert wind, which had been whipping up dust, seemed to quiet, as if listening. We didn't know, Snake Eyes," Dusty mumbled, his face flushing beneath his trail dust. He lowered his weapon completely, a metallic clink echoing in the sudden stillness. We thought he hurt you." The other brothers mumbled their apologies, their eyes avoiding Tall Bear's steady gaze. Tall Bear simply watched them, his expression unreadable as Snake Eyes, still favoring his leg, was helped onto his horse. The sun, a bruised orange, began its slow descent, painting the vast expanse of sand and rock in hues of fire and shadow. He saw the flicker of genuine remorse in Dusty's eyes, the grudging respect in Snake Eyes' final nod. The thud of hooves receded, growing fainter until only the vast silence of the desert remained. Tall Bear took a deep breath, the scent of parched earth and distant sage filling his lungs. He had offered kindness, and in return, it had become a shield, deflecting the very violence it sought to prevent. The world was a complex loom, and today, an unexpected thread of mercy had been woven into its unforgiving fabric.